LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the October 21st edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. Give me a thumbs up if you like the 14 best, most newsworthy clips that I picked out for you for what should be a really educational, fair use, media criticism, and political analysis show for you all tonight. There's no political comedy from Real Time or from Saturday Night Live this week. Real Time had this 25-year retrospective of 25 years of Bill Maher, going back to when he was on Politically Incorrect on ABC, and I didn't take any clips from that. I do have some inadvertent political comedy from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos this morning that I'll start off with. It's all part of my big topic, Trump Midterm Mania. If you look down in the video description, you can see my list of 14 clips that's down there. You can click on that, follow along my sometimes cryptic notes. I am taking all of my clips from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, except CBS's Face the Nation took the week off, preempted by NFL football, what you and the rest of the world call American football, I guess. But I guess football is very important, but not this kind of football in a lot of the rest of the world. But most of this is about the midterms. I will be talking about the Saudi Arabia scandal a little more than I did last week, especially because Fox News and ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos both devoted their news summaries to that topic, and I will and I have some feelings that it's like too big a story, but then there's also one part of the story that could become a bigger story, which I will talk about when I get to that part of the clips. But like I promised, I am going to start off with inadvertent political comedy. This is another topic I'll be covering, the so-called caravan of immigrants coming up through Guatemala to Mexico in the last week and on their way to the southern border of the United States. Donald Trump is making it a big issue. And so there was a ABC reporter down there, Matt Gutman, talking to George Stephanopoulos, and he's talking about this caravan cannot stop. Nothing can stop this caravan. And what's kind of amusing, you'll see in the background, the caravan of people does not really cooperate with the way he's narrating, and George Stephanopoulos doesn't seem to notice over in this clip.
Federal police here. We don't know if we're going to see arrests of these people detained at any point, but there clearly is no stopping them right now. They have commandeered the main north-south highway in this entire region, and they don't look like they're going to stop anytime soon.
Boy, they sure don't. Chaotic situation down there at the border.
If you notice there, the caravan actually stopped right when he said, "There's no stopping this caravan." I guess that's what passes for inadvertent political comedy on the weeks where I don't have any Saturday Night Live or Real Time with Bill Maher to start off the show. Although I will have a couple little comedic moments coming along. But the midterm is actually very serious. A lot of people think this is the most important midterm election in our lifetime. And what is really maddening about it is there's kind of a range of possible outcomes. Anywhere from the Democrats taking the House and the Senate to the Republicans holding on to the House and the Senate, and that's kind of within the margin of error. And there, you'll see some polls in this NBC Meet the Press news summary I'm about to show you. And then I'm going to show you some, Nate Silver is one of the guests on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, and I'll show his odds of taking the House and taking the Senate, and the odds of Beto O'Rourke winning the Senate seat from Ted Cruz in Texas. I'll have some brief clips of Beto O'Rourke and Ted Cruz a little later, also from ABC's This Week. But first I want to start off with this NBC's Meet the Press. They usually have the best news summary. This is actually 4 minutes, 43 seconds long. Well worth watching, talking about all the possible theories of how the midterms could go. As I was talking about, it's Chuck Todd actually refers to it as a choose-your-own adventure midterm. And then there's, of course, some talk about how Trump is trying to gin up his base all about the base, even make that joke, which I guess I could have used as a joke. But I'll talk about this news summary with you after we watch it from NBC's Meet the Press together this morning over here.
Sunday morning, and welcome to the Choose Your Own Adventure midterm elections. Is there a Democratic wave coming? We've got data to support that. Has a surge of post-Kavanaugh enthusiasm for Republicans turned back the Democrats' momentum? There's data to support that. Or could this be a typical midterm with Democrats making just modest gains? There's data to support that too. And we have plenty of new data this morning. Here's what our brand new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll shows with just over 2 weeks to go until the midterms. Among registered voters, Democrats hold a 7-point lead in the generic ballot, 48-41. That's down significantly from the 12-point lead Democrats held just a month ago, pre-Kavanaugh, when it was 52-40. But wait, there's more. Among likely voters, the Democrats' lead grows, not shrinks. It grows to 9, 50-41. Here's why that's interesting. It's the first time ever in our polling that our likely voter model shows a better number for the Democrats than the registered voter number. Normally, in midterms, Republicans have the likely voter advantage. So what's different this year? It's the heightened enthusiasm for Democrats among millennials, Latinos, and younger women, groups that historically have had low turnout rates but are making it into our likely voter model this year. As for President Trump, he has his best numbers yet in our poll. Among registered voters, 47% approve of his performance in office, while 49% disapprove. That's substantially better than his numbers last month in our poll, 44-52 approve, disapprove. But again, among those likely voters, his numbers did get worse, 45% approve, 52% disapprove. There are a lot of questions leading up to this year's midterms. But here's what we do know. There's a higher interest in this election than any midterm we've ever measured. Turnout's going to be through the roof. And the divide between men and women is growing, with the Democratic strength the result of unprecedented support among women. Now, will it be enough to stop the Republicans' post-Kavanaugh bump? That's going to be the story of the next 16 days.
Democrats produce mobs. Republicans produce jobs.
President Trump's closing argument is all about the base.
Democrats want to throw your borders wide open to deadly drugs and ruthless gangs.
And Republican candidates are sounding more and more like Mr. Trump, repeating dire warnings on immigration.
Remember, it's going to be an election of the caravan.
The caravan is coming from Central America.
This migrant caravan.
We got this freaking caravan?
At times using violent language.
Any guy that can do a body slam, he's my kind of...
I'm going to stomp all over your face with golf spikes.
Candidates are even recycling Mr. Trump's insults.
He's a low-energy person.
Kirsten, do you need to come comfy? You know, you need a little more energy there. I think your teleprompter's going a little too slow.
With the fight for control of the Senate playing out largely in states the president won, this base-first strategy banks on Mr. Trump's ability to bring out voters in more rural areas where he is popular. But the president's rhetoric is unlikely to help Republicans in the suburban House districts where they are already at a demographic disadvantage. And for the first time ever, in 2 straight NBC News Wall Street Journal polls, women favored Democratic control of Congress by a whopping 25 points.
I think now we're going to hell in a handbasket. I just can't believe some of the antics that go on with the President of the United States.
70 of the 75 House seats the Cook Political Report rates as competitive are held by Republicans, including 25 that Hillary Clinton won in 2016. Democrats need to flip just 23 of those 75 to win back the House. But the Democratic enthusiasm advantage has narrowed after the Kavanaugh fight. And the question is whether those fundamentals will be enough to produce not just a takeover, but a wave.
Pre-existing conditions.
Meanwhile, Democrats are avoiding a broad national message, remaining laser-focused on a single issue.
Protections for pre-existing conditions.
Protections for pre-existing conditions.
For pre-existing conditions?
Pre-existing conditions.
Pre-existing health conditions.
And with President Obama largely absent from the campaign trail and House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi unpopular with independents, Democrats running in states Trump won are running away from the national party.
Are you a Democrat?
I am.
Proud Democrat?
Oh my gosh, it's hard to say proud. I don't know that, I'm not sure that people are even proud of parties anymore.
And even running away from Democratic leaders.
Changing the players makes some sense. I think we ought to change the players.
Joining me now from Chicago is the Senate Democrat.
And that's Dick Durbin. I'll show a clip of Dick Durbin a little later. And it's important to remember that end of the news summary where they showed Representative Sinema running for Senate in Arizona saying, she's, wouldn't say she was proud of the Democratic Party. And that comes up in the questions to Dick Durbin, and also Senator Thom Tillison. But the one thing I wanted to comment on from there is first Trump came up with that great slogan, they want mob, Democrats produce mobs, Republicans produce jobs, right? And the big response from Democrats to that is that, pre-existing condition. You saw those clips spliced together that healthcare is their big issue. Well, if you followed me on Twitter, and also if you followed Lawrence Tribe, I don't know if you know who Lawrence Tribe is, but a lot of times I show pictures of Sandy over there. During that last clip, I took this picture of Sandy over there. It's sort of like a, oh no, is it upside down? Oh no. Hold on, can I edit this shot so that Sandy's not...
From Fox News in Washington.
See, when I try to edit shots, sorry about that. I guess everybody who has to drink when I make a mistake here, but let me see if I can change the rotation on this. How do I? Jeez, this is not making it easy. I was trying to show you that you want to see this upside down because I can't figure out how to turn it. Wait, maybe if I do the X rotation. 180 and the Y rotation 180. What happens if I do that? Who knows? Well, I guess we're about to find out because here's the... Oh, I did the X rotate. I rotated the wrong... Hold on a second here. I don't know what you have to drink for this, but I was trying to rotate the picture, and instead I rotated myself. Okay, I'm right side up again. But anyway, that was the picture. The whole point of why I was trying to show you that picture is that Sandy with that American constitutional law text in the background. That's by Lawrence Tribe. That was a long way of getting to Lawrence Tribe. And Lawrence Tribe was... on Twitter asking for a good slogan for Democrats, and you can see if you follow me on Twitter that this is what I put up in response to Lawrence Tribe. Democrats are for health care, Republicans are for wealth care. I don't know what you think of my slogan, and I'm sorry I turned upside down and I couldn't turn upside, whatever. That was kind of, what was that all about? Anyway, So I wanted to show you that slogan, and but there's a link down in the video description to my Twitter page, twitter.com/LiberalViewer. It's not that hard to find. So if you followed me on Twitter and followed Lawrence Tribe, you would have seen that tweet. And I'm actually going to show a tweet response I gave to President Donald Trump a little later when we get to the immigration issue. But I want to get to the next news summary. It's the other news summary that's about the midterms. The other two from... ABC and from, the other two from Fox News and, the other two from Fox News and ABC are more about the Saudi Arabia foreign policy issue. This one from CNN State of the Union, Jake Tapper says our State of the Union this week is barnstorming, which is Trump, going to all these rallies, but then it's sort of a transitional news summary because it talks about the Saudi Arabia scandal at the end of this clip, which I will talk about with you after you watch. It's only about a minute long, and I'll talk about it with you after we watch it together over here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Tampa, Florida, where the State of our Union is barnstorming. We are here in a key midterm battleground, just 16 days away from an election that will help determine the future of Donald Trump's presidency and the future of the United States, with the House, the Senate, and 36 governor's races up for grabs, including right here in Florida. This is all happening as the president faces an escalating international crisis. In a brand new interview with the Washington Post, the president acknowledged that Saudi Arabia has engaged in deception and lies about the death of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, but it's unclear how much he holds top Saudi leaders accountable for the lies or for the murder. He still sounds open to believing the official Saudi explanation that Khashoggi was killed in a physical altercation gone wrong inside their consulate in Turkey. The president saying it's possible something went, quote, badly awry without the knowledge of Saudi leadership. The Washington Post, where Jamal Khashoggi worked, calls the Saudi story, quote, a cover-up. Joining me now is Senator Bob Corker, Republican from Tennessee.
I'm not going to show retiring Senator Bob Corker, but he was very skeptical of what Saudi Arabia said. And you saw in that news summary from CNN State of the Union, they seem to think that the president was somewhat skeptical. But actually, maybe it's because of the time difference from when Fox News Sunday records their show, and then CNN State of the Union, that's at 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. It's a live show. But here you'll see Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace does an even shorter news summary, and they say that the president is still saying that the Saudi story is credible over in this clip.
Again, from Fox News in Washington. 17 days after the disappearance of Jamal Khashoggi, the Saudi government is finally offering its account of what happened to him. But much of the world is not buying it. The Saudis say Khashoggi was killed in a fistfight in their consulate in Istanbul. They've arrested 18 people involved in the case and fired 5 top officials, some with close ties to the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. President Trump says he finds the report credible, but will work with Congress to find ways to punish the Saudi government. Joining me now from Kentucky, Republican.
And I will have a clip of Senator Rand Paul bringing up one of the 2 points that I don't think gets brought up enough. I mean, there's one way in which I think that this Saudi scandal is overplayed, and that it's, this one guy Saudi Arabia killed compared to like what they're doing in Yemen and what they do to people in Saudi Arabia all the time. But this is like a journalist who worked for the Washington Post, and so that's like a huge focus for the corporate media, because this is someone who works for the corporate media. And I think that also explains why ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos focused so much on this Saudi Arabia story. They actually had the Washington Post reporter Khashoggi, I can't pronounce it, that's why I haven't been saying his name, Jamal Khashoggi, people pronounce the G's different ways, but here you'll see George Stephanopoulos do his introduction, and they really focus on it as well, I think because they had Khashoggi's editor from the Washington Post on. I won't have any clips of that, but after I show this clip, I will explain the underplayed and overplayed parts of this story. I kind of just talked about the overplayed part, but I'll talk about the underplayed part a little more before I show the next ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos clip with 2 members of Congress. But here's just the news intro, about 1 minute and 4 seconds long. Talk about a little more with you after we watch it together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. We begin this morning with that deepening crisis over the disappearance of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi. After weeks of denials in the face of mounting evidence, Saudi Arabia finally admitted late Friday that Khashoggi was killed at their consulate in Turkey. But that concession has only intensified global criticism of the kingdom and its headstrong crown prince. And late last night, President Trump stepped back from his previous acceptance of Saudi cover stories. There's been deceptions and there's been lies, he told the Washington Post. But Trump also called Saudi Arabia an incredible ally. And he has not concluded that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was behind the murder. Nobody told me he's responsible. Nobody has told me he's not responsible, Trump said. The big question's now, will Turkish audio tapes of the killing prove that the Saudis are still lying about what happened? Can the Crown Prince continue as Saudi's leader if he's shown to be complicit in the murder? And how will President Trump and the world respond? Our senior foreign correspondent Ian Pannell is on the ground in Istanbul with the...
And I'm not going to get to the additional news reports from ABC. If you want to watch ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, like the source of all these clips, there's a link down in the video description. You see both ABC and CNN said that Trump was skeptical of the Saudi claims, while over on Fox News they were saying that he found them credible. And I'll show Chris Wallace asking Rand Paul about that in the clip after next, where Rand Paul brings up Yemen, that's where I was saying this is overplayed. Saudi Arabia killed this one journalist. I mean, they did it in a really blatant way, in like an in-your-face way maybe, and but it's also because it's a journalist. That's why the press focuses on it so much, and not like, I mean, they focus more on this than there was like a school bus full of children a month ago that was bombed in Yemen. That didn't get as much play as this, and also there's the whole bone saw aspect, where I think I saw Stephen Colbert was referring to Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, MBS they call him. He was saying MBS stands for Mr. Bonesaw. But anyway, I've talked about how it's overplayed. The one way this may be underplayed is if there is the reason that Trump is taking the side of MBS and Saudi Arabia so much is because he has financial dealings with Saudi Arabia going back. They bought apartments, they bought a yacht from him, they bought a floor of Trump Tower or something like that. And you'll see in this next clip, George Stephanopoulos asked both a Democrat first a Republican, Peter King of New York, and then Adam Schiff, a Democrat from California, about this. And Adam Schiff says, we should look into this, but Peter King's response is ridiculous. Like, this is the wrong time to inject partisanship. Like, when is the right time to be asking questions about Donald Trump's ties to Saudi Arabia, financially? And at least George Stephanopoulos asked this question, never showed up on Fox News, even though they focused on the story. But I'll show the Fox News clip next where they at least got Rand Paul talking about Yemen. But here's the financial ties aspect that has been underplayed, where this could really be a scandal, which I'll talk about a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Congressman King have said part of the reason for that is that the Trump organization, the Trump family, is actually profiting from their ties to the Saudis. Should the president release all information related to his financial ties to the Saudi kingdom?
Well, first of all, I think it's wrong to inject partisanship in this right now. Nobody was more supportive of the Saudis than President Obama. The large arms deals under President Obama. He fought us tooth and nail, attacked the Congress when we allowed 9/11 families to sue the Saudis. So he went out of his way to shield the Saudis. To be making these type of allegations against the president, listen, if you want to do it 3 or 4 months from now, do it. But the fact is, right now, the president is in a very delicate diplomatic spot, the same as President Obama was. And I think, at least for this, let's have a certain timeout when it comes to making the partisan shots. Let's deal with it on the merits. What Saudi Arabia did was savage, it was evil, it has to be condemned, we have to take action. But let's not be questioning the motives of our president right now. He should be the president of all the people at this moment. When the dust settles, then people can make the allegations they want. But again, I just go back to the heat that I took from the Obama administration when I was fighting for 9/11 families to sue the Saudis. And that's the only time during the Obama administration that Congress was able to override his veto. But that's how strongly he felt about shielding the Saudis.
George, if I could just add, I do think we need in the Intelligence Committee to do a deep dive, a probe in terms of Saudi Arabia, in terms of the Saudi efforts of the war in Yemen, the civilian casualties there, in terms of this murder. But we also ought to determine whether financial motives are motivating the president and the First Family. This is the very problem with the president not releasing his tax returns. It leaves the American people wondering, is U.S.-Saudi policy being driven by something other than national interest? So I do think we ought to demand answers of the administration.
Congressman King, one way to get to the bottom.
So kudos to George Stephanopoulos for asking about that angle, and Adam Schiff, of course, you would expect him to give that answer. One thing I didn't put in the video description was a link to this Glenn Greenwald tweet I saw today, although I liked it on Twitter. So if you followed me on Twitter, I have a link down to my Twitter.com/LiberalViewer Twitter feed, and if you follow what I liked, you'd see I liked this tweet from Glenn Greenwald, where he tweeted something that Adam Schiff said a few years back about Saudi Arabia's involvement in Yemen, where he was all for Saudi Arabia's involvement in Yemen. So his shock at the human rights abuses of Saudi Arabia is a little late at this point. And while I give kudos to George Stephanopoulos there for bringing that up, they didn't talk about Yemen that much, but they at least did talk about Yemen over on Fox News Sunday with Rand Paul, because he's like an isolationist Republican. He likes to say non-interventionist, I guess. Chris Wallace never mentioned those financial ties between Trump and the Saudi family that you saw in that last clip. So that's definitely an example of Fox News bias, but at least they let Rand Paul talk about the human rights abuses in Yemen, and Chris Wallace is bringing up the conflict between how Rand Paul looks at the explanations from Saudi Arabia and the way Trump does, like, oh, it was a fight. He died during questioning it. I actually saw this meme circulating earlier. I guess this is kind of political comedy. It's very black comedy. It's a black cat. He died accidentally while I was questioning him. That's kind of the Saudi explanation, I guess. But I don't find it credible. Rand Paul didn't find it credible. He can't explain why Donald Trump finds it credible, but he does bring up human rights abuses in Yemen over here.
Tougher. President Trump was asked about the arrest of 18 people involved in the case and the firing of 5 officials, some of them with close ties to the Crown Prince. Here's what he had to say.
I think it's a good first step. It's a big step. It's a lot of people involved, and I think it's a great first step.
Do you consider it credible, their explanation?
I do.
Does President Trump know something that you don't, Senator? Or, frankly, do you think he's covering for the Saudis?
I think the Saudis are an authoritarian government. They are directed from the top down, and you don't have people just going off and doing things on their own. I feel certain that the Crown Prince was involved and that he directed this, and that's why I think we cannot continue to have relations with him. And so I think he's going to have to be replaced, frankly. But I think that sanctions don't go far enough. I think we need to look at the arms sale, because this is not just about this journalist being killed. It's about the war in Yemen, where tens of thousands of civilians are being killed. It's about them spreading hatred of Christians and Jews and Hindus throughout the world. I mean, thousands and thousands of madrasas teaching radical violence against the West. The Saudis have not acted as our friend, and they need to change their behavior.
I understand that, but I'm asking you directly about the president's reaction. He says he finds credible an account that you find incredible. Why do you think he's doing that?
Exactly. I don't know the reasoning, or can't answer for the president's thought process on this. I can only say that I think many of us looking at this situation think that this couldn't happen in an authoritarian government without the Crown Prince being involved.
All right, let's talk now about punishment.
So, about 50% of what Rand Paul says makes sense. That's what, being a libertarian conservative, that means about 50% makes sense and 50% is like crazy. Like, I made a video a long time ago about how he doesn't really believe in the civil rights laws from the 1960s, like where hotels and restaurants can't discriminate against people based on race, like the whole the Woolworth lunch counter thing and all that kind of. He thinks that was all wrongly decided, so he's crazy about a lot of stuff, but not very much. I think I pretty much agree with everything Rand Paul said in that last clip. So that's one of the weird confluences in politics that Republicans can sometimes say things that make sense. And for at least 1 minute and 47 seconds, I think Rand Paul was doing a pretty good job there of making sense about Saudi Arabia. I am now going to move on to the midterm topic. That's the couple. There were a couple news summaries more devoted to Saudi Arabia, and then I gave you those 2 clips with 3 politicians talking about it. I think I've explained where I think it's overplayed in terms of focusing on this one journalist when Saudi Arabia has so much in terms of misdeeds that we could be upset about, and then the way it's been underplayed in terms of Donald Trump's financial ties to Saudi Arabia that could make it actually a real big scandal akin to the Russia collusion scandal. There could be like a Saudi Arabia collusion scandal, because there was, even before the election, there was some, there's been some reporting that Saudi Arabia tried to help Donald Trump get elected. So that could be a future part of this scandal. And now I'm going to move on to the midterms themselves. The first clip I want to show on that is from Ben Sasse, the supposedly the reasonable, moderate Republican. Some people say he might run against Donald Trump in 2020 as like a reasonable Republican alternative. But in some ways, he reminds me of Jeff Flake, where, you know, he looks all like, oh, I'm so worried about what Donald Trump is doing, but I vote with him all the time. And even in this, he's not even really worried in this next clip, where you'll see Jake Tapper. This is from Jake Tapper on CNN State of the Union, where he introduces Ben Sasse's book about, you know, how, you know, we have to come together as a country. And then he asks him about Donald Trump praising this Republican member of Congress who got elected after body slamming a journalist for having the temerity to ask him about health care. And kudos to Jake Tapper for bringing up actually what it is that the journalist was asking this candidate about when he got body slammed. And by the way, if you saw the thumbnail for my video today, Donald Trump, you know, making that's like in the middle of this body, he like mocks the body slam. That's where I took the thumbnail from, though I think it might have been from one of the news summaries. But you'll see Jake Tapper replays that clip, asks Ben Sasse about it, and he says, oh, you know, in the short term, he's just being playful. People know he's just being playful. And that, you know, that's the first word that comes to my mind when I see Donald Trump promoting violence is, oh, yeah, how playful he is. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch this CNN State of the Union clip from this morning over here.
They will tonight. With 16 days to go until the midterm elections, and with the president facing the reality that Democrats, many of them impeachment hungry, could take back the House. He's back in no-holds-barred campaign mode, going back to what worked in 2016, seizing on a hardline immigration message and endorsing violence against journalists, seemingly, even as he accuses Democrats of inciting the mob. Joining me now, Senator Ben Sasse, Republican from Nebraska. He's the author of a new book called Them, Why We Hate Each Other and How to Heal. Senator Sasse, thanks for joining us. Your book deals with why the country is so divided right now. I was reading it while this happened, and I want you to take a listen to what President Trump had to say at a recent rally. And he mentioned that Montana congressman who ultimately pleaded guilty to physically assaulting a journalist whose crime was he tried to ask him a question about health care. Take a listen.
Any guy that can do a body slam, he's my kind. And I said, oh, this is terrible. He's going to lose the election. Then I said, well, wait a minute. I know Montana pretty well. I think it might help him. And it did.
Mr. Senator, you write quite compelling in your book about the need for all of us in America to see the humanity of each other. And I have to say, I've been surprised at how quiet Republicans have been about the President of the United States joking about a criminal assault on a reporter. What was your reaction to that?
You know, I got to admit, I don't follow the rallies closely, but, you know, I believe that the First Amendment is the beating heart of the American experiment, so we need to have a president who celebrates the First Amendment and not pretends that beating up a reporter is okay. But I think what you hear from a lot of Nebraskans who also, I think, tune out most of the rallies is there's sort of a short-term, long-term thing going on, and people feel like the president's rhetoric is kind of short-term playful. I don't think it's okay, but I do think most people tune most of it out. I think what we need to be having a conversation about is the long term of how does the next generation understand the American experiment? Because right now we don't have much shared sense of what it is.
But it's not playful to joke about assault, is it?
No. No, I mean, the guy was convicted of a crime, and the First Amendment, free speech, press, religion, assembly, protest, the right of redress of grievances, these are things we believe are rights that 320 million Americans have, not because government gives us these rights, but because there are rights by nature, the founders would have said, and government's our shared project to secure them. So we need a president and all other elected officials to be stewarding and shepherding our shared understanding of that to the next generation. So no, it's not okay. But I do think that it's sort of baked into the president's stock price that sort of this amoralistic take he has on it is just what most people think the president's going to do. And most people where I live sort of ignore most of it. Some think it's funny. Some are really anxious about it. But most people just think, well, that's kind of how the president talks. We need to do better than that. But I also think there's a danger in pretending each new rally is immediate urgent. I wish he did it differently, obviously.
You're on the Senate Armed Services.
So I think I pretty much criticized that clip before I showed it, though kudos also to Jake Tapper, not only for mentioning what the crime of the body slammed reporter was, asking a question about healthcare, but for following up after Senator Ben Sasse said that, oh yeah, the body slam thing, that was just being playful. I don't know. Before I showed the clip, I said I found that hard to believe. And I'm glad that Jake Tapper emphasized that with the follow-up question. That's all I really want to say about that clip, but I have a few clips now coming up. I don't know, you hear Sandy whining over there. Sandy has not been fed. Sandy wants food. I'm sorry, it's going to be about another 20 or 30 minutes, then you will be fed. The next few clips are about the caravan. Well, the third clip is about the caravan and a few other issues, and it's kind of a panel of multiple politicians that I'll get to when I get to that third clip. But the first two clips are all about immigration and the caravan, and I think it's a really important issue. This caravan that, I talked about at the very beginning of the broadcast because of the inadvertent comedy clip where you saw from ABC that they said that nothing's going to stop this caravan, and all of a sudden they stopped to let cars go past, I think is what was going on in that first clip. This caravan is full of people from what's called the Golden Triangle, Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala, where there are some real big problems, and I think that the idea of asylum and the importance of asylum is where people say that they are facing real threats to their lives and their countries of origin. There's a law that says people who are coming up for asylum, those are not illegal aliens. They're not even undocumented immigrants. People have a right to ask for asylum. And that actually gets brought up in some of these clips. This first clip is actually the Ted Cruz versus Beto O'Rourke clip, where what I like about this clip is they bring up family separation, which was never brought up on Fox News when the immigration issue came up. Here you'll see family separation is such a toxic issue in Texas, like in all the border states, that even Ted Cruz will not endorse Donald Trump's position. But I think Beto O'Rourke has a much better answer than Ted Cruz. Of course, I am LiberalViewer, so that's kind of what you would expect. But this is just a 1-minute clip where ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos had an on the campaign trail with both Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke. I took 1 minute having to do with immigration that I'll talk about with you after we watch it together over here.
And the senator agree on most of the Republican agenda, but Trump's past policy of family separation at the border, it's one area where Cruz broke with the administration.
So if this policy is reinstated, is this something that you would challenge the president on?
Well, listen, this is something we should all come together on. When it comes to family separation, everyone should agree. The right place for kids to be is with their parents.
If it comes to it, will you say, President, this isn't the right policy?
Well, listen, I've been very clear to the president. We need to enforce the law, but we should also keep families together.
Cruz might be slightly to the left of the president on immigration, but O'Rourke has a completely different solution.
If things are so desperate in Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, that someone would risk their lives to come here, then what can we do to improve conditions there? We've invested trillions of dollars in our wars in the Middle East. Could we invest some fraction of that to provide the stability in the Northern Triangle countries of Central America, to make sure that people have a reason to stay and raise their families where they were born?
Even though Texas ranks...
Is it the Northern Triangle or the Golden Triangle? Maybe I'm the one who has it screwed up, but at least you got the three countries right, that it's Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. And Beto O'Rourke, of course, focuses on the real problem. Ted Cruz, to his credit, although I'm sure it's all like politics knowing. That's the thing, on the border states, they actually understand immigration and have are even more compassionate about immigration than the people in like the states where they're just worried about the other. They're getting scared by Fox News. They don't really have day-to-day well, I don't know, maybe some of you in the border. I live in California. I used to live in Los Angeles. There's a lot of immigrants in the Central Valley. I live in the northern Central Valley here in California, which, you know, still has some agriculture. And I mean, I see immigrants, even undocumented immigrants, as a really vibrant, productive, contributing part of our community. I've known a lot of undocumented immigrants over the years, and that's why I think it's really important to have comprehensive immigration reform and a path to citizenship. And that sort of comes up in this clip from Fox News Sunday. They never mention the asylum topic, and I'm going to make an important comment about asylum, or I'm going to show you a screenshot of one of my tweets replying to Donald Trump about asylum in just a minute. But first I want to show this Fox News Sunday clip where Chris Wallace is talking to Martha McSally, the Republican candidate for Senate in Arizona. You just saw the Texas race. I think several weeks ago I said if the blue wave is really huge, the way we'll know is Beto O'Rourke will beat Ted Cruz. And it's still possible, even though the polls show them, like, what is it, like 9 points? Ted Cruz is 9 points ahead. But that's based on likely voters. And Beto O'Rourke, his whole plan is based on activating people who aren't likely voters. So that's why there's such a range of possible outcomes for the midterms. And in the best case scenario for Democrats, Beto O'Rourke will beat Ted Cruz. A race that's a lot closer is the one in Arizona. I actually spliced together the Fox News Sunday introduction of the interview with Martha McSally, where they show how close the polls are. They said they gave both the Republican and the Democrat a chance to come on the program. And then I spliced that together with Martha McSally talking about immigration. They never bring up asylum. They never bring up family separation. This is just Chris Wallace saying, well, you know, you used to be more compassionate. Now you're more harsh. Aren't you a hypocrite? But never really talking about the real moral issues in immigration that I will talk about a little more after we watch this Fox News Sunday clip from this morning together over here.
On election night, just 16 days from now, the battle for control of the Senate may come down to the tight race for an open seat in Arizona. The Real Clear Politics average of recent polls shows basically a dead heat. Republican Martha McSally leads Democrat Kyrsten Sinema 46% to 45.3%. The winner will be Arizona's first female senator. We invited both candidates to join us today. Kyrsten Sinema declined, but Congresswoman McSally joins us now from Tucson. There was a rally yesterday that the president attended and spoke very much on your behalf. At that rally, he also talked about that caravan of thousands of migrants headed from Honduras to the U.S. Here he is.
You think they're all wonderful people. You got some bad people in those groups. You got some tough people in those groups. And I'll tell you what, this country doesn't want them.
Congresswoman, do you support the president's policy on migration, even his threat to send troops to the southern border to shut it down to prevent that caravan from coming in?
Well, I share the president's frustration that the Democrats are obstructing on this issue. I represent a southern border district, 80 miles of the border. I chair the Border Security Subcommittee, and we've got fifth-generation ranchers down there on the border right now dealing with the cartel activity, continuing to traffic opioids and other drugs and human trafficking into our communities. This is a public safety and a national security issue. We also have, like in the town of Yuma, the city of Yuma, we've got a number of people that are being trafficked by the cartels, taking advantage of the loopholes in our laws so that they know they're going to be released right into the interior of the United States, never to show up for their court date. This is not going to work. This isn't working. And my bill that I worked really closely with the White House on, close these loopholes. Only Congress can do it so that this administration can enforce the law and make sure that we secure our border. This is a unifying issue across Arizona.
But Congresswoman, before you support supported what was known as the Goodlatte bill. You supported another bill in 2015. Your opponent says that you're on all sides of this issue because in the bill you supported in 2015, you opposed defunding DACA, and in fact, you supported a path to citizenship for the Dreamers. So what about the argument Kyrsten Sinema makes that you've been inconsistent on this issue?
Chris, you understand the legislative process. I have been consistently leading on this issue as the Border Security Subcommittee chair. This is a difficult issue, but when the president kicked DACA to Congress appropriately, we worked together, Goodlatte, McCall, Labrador, and myself, to lead, to identify a solution that secures the border, closes these legal loopholes, moves us more towards a merit-based system, and does something on DACA. This is what we worked on to bring to the floor. Unfortunately, we couldn't get it passed, but we're going to keep working on it because this border still needs to be secured. These loopholes still need to be closed. And I'm going to continue to lead on this when I'm in the Senate. Even though Washington, D.C. moves on to other topics, we still have to address this issue.
So, I don't know, was that a real journalistic interview or that series of questions there where... Did you hear... Can you hear Sandy? I'm sorry about that. It distracts me. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but... I should have fed her before I started the show. I will have a bonus... Dash and Sandy clip at the end of the show. I don't know if you can hear that whining or... I don't know if you can hear Sandy whining because she hasn't been fed yet. But I will feed Sandy after I finish the broadcast. I will have a bonus Dash and Sandy clip from this morning. Or is it this morning? Well, it's from a morning sometime very recently. But somebody's very hungry over here. But I still have several clips to show. That one my criticism of that clip was, even though Chris Wallace was like questioning Martha McSally about her past positions, you know, how she used to be more compassionate to the Dreamers. Now that she's running for Senate, she's like more anti-immigrant in line with Trump, but never mentioned asylum, never mentioned family separation. So not that journalistic a cross-examination. I thought one thing that was really interesting about what Donald Trump said, this is my tweet about immigration I was going to tell you about. Donald Trump actually said something that I think helps people with their claims of asylum. You know, a while back, Attorney General Jeff Sessions said he was going to stop your whining, silly puppy. Jeff Sessions says that he was going to limit claims for asylum for people who were saying that they suffered from domestic violence or gang violence. And that was because, you know, those are private matters. That doesn't have to do with the government. But Donald Trump actually tweeted that governments in these countries, quote, have almost no control over their population, unquote, which actually bolsters the asylum claims. Because if you're saying I'm a victim of domestic violence or gang violence, if the government has no control, that means that it's not just a private thing. It's, you know, there's no law enforcement to help you, so you need asylum. So I wanted to bring that up before I get to this final clip that has to do with immigration and a bunch of other issues. This is from CNN's State of the Union, where Jake Tapper had this panel with two people who I think are like big Republican villains. This Pam Biondi, the Attorney General in Florida. I remember her going all the way back to Trump v. Gore, the 2000 election, and then she's also been a big, not Trump v. Gore, Bush v. Gore. I have Trump on the brain, I guess. But no, Bush v. Gore back in 2000, and then she's also been kind of a corrupt Trump supporter, and you know, she stopped the Florida investigation into Trump University, and then there's also this other Republican who's been one of the like biggest supporters of Donald Trump, who hasn't yet indicted, you know, not Chris Collins from, is it Delaware? And then Duncan Hunter from California, both were like the number 1 and 2 members of Congress who supported Trump. Well, this guy what's his name? Oh, Matt Gaetz. He's also in here. And then the one Democrat is Ted Deutch, who was a big supporter of the Parkland students and gun control after the Parkland shooting. All of these people are from Florida. They all seem to love being civil to each other on this panel. And I'll talk about, and they bring up both the immigration issue, the caravan issue, and conspiracy theories, and well, you'll see what comes up, and I'll talk about it with you after we watch that almost 3-minute clip together over here.
Congressman Deutch, I know that you support Gillum for governor and Nelson for Senate, but do you think that DeSantis's decision to tie himself more closely, at least in ads, with President Trump might play a factor, might play a role in whether or not he wins?
Sure, absolutely I do, Jake, and I appreciate the panel that you've brought together today. I have immense respect for my colleague Matt Gaetz and for General Bondi, but they represent really what's happening in this election. You've got General Bondi, who, on behalf of Rick Scott, rather than defending the people of Florida, went to court to sue to take health care away from people with pre-existing conditions.
You're talking about Obamacare.
Right, and Congressman Gaetz, who tweets out conspiracy theories that the president then uses to advance his own conspiracy theories, all the while bringing a Holocaust denier to the State of the Union. That's the Trump brand in Florida, and while I respect the service they provide, people understand it. They want someone who's actually going to stand up for them, for the people, and not for President Trump alone.
I'll let you respond to that, but let's let Attorney General Bondi respond first.
Thank you. As Chief Law Enforcement Officer and Legal Officer for the state of Florida, I firmly believe in covering pre-existing conditions. I've always said that, but we have to do it in a legal way, and Congress has to act. And that's why we filed this lawsuit. We all want pre-existing conditions covered. And it's nice to have such a panel, by the way, where we can conduct ourselves with civility, and we actually all like each other.
I want to, first of all, just read the tweet that he's referring to about the conspiracy theory. It had to do with the caravan, and you tweeted out, footage in Honduras giving cash to women and children to join the caravan and storm the U.S. border at election time. Soros, U.S.-backed NGOs, non-government organizations, time to investigate the source. That's what Congressman Deutch is referring to.
Yeah, I was wrong. It wasn't in Honduras. It was in Guatemala. That tape was provided to me by Honduran government officials. It was collected by Central American intelligence officials. And I think we've got to learn a lot more about how these large organizations of people come together. What I've learned on the Armed Services Committee looking at intelligence reports is you really have three groups. You have the thugs, you have the organizers, and then you have a lot of desperate migrants who feel like they have nothing to lose. And where you have those thugs forcing local businesses to turn over cash and resources, that's a problem. If you have organizers working in concert with U.S. NGOs or left-leaning groups, that's also a problem. So I think that we've seen that model in other parts of the world, Jake. In the Balkans, Judicial Watch just did a report where you saw U.S. NGOs working alongside Soros-backed groups for political outcomes. I hope that's not happening in Latin America or anywhere else in the world.
Simone Sanders, this is an issue that not just Congressman Gaetz.
So I think I pretty much pre-criticized that clip before I showed it, but Matt Gaetz saying, oh, I'm sorry, I was wrong. It was Honduras, not Guatemala. Well, there were like 5 other pieces of misinformation in that clip, and you saw that Jake Tapper didn't even really have time to follow up with all the other, or I don't know if he didn't have time, but maybe I should criticize Jake Tapper for letting Matt Gaetz get away with that. And Matt Gaetz is one of the most, the biggest Trump brown-nosers in Congress or whatever, who hasn't yet been indicted. Like I said, he's not Chris Collins, he's not Duncan Hunter. Maybe he's like number 3, like number 1 now, unindicted Trump brown-noser, Matt Gaetz of Florida. That's my opinion. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. But now I have 2 more clips. These are 2 members of the Senate, both on NBC's Meet the Press. First, Senator Dick Durbin, who's like the number 2 Democrat in the Senate. And you'll see he is talking to Chuck Todd. And Chuck Todd asks a question about, remember I told you all the way back at the beginning of the show to remember from Chuck Todd's news summary about how Kyrsten Sinema, the Democrat in Arizona, was, wouldn't say she was proud of being a Democrat. Well, that sort of forms the basis for this Dick Durbin question. And Dick Durbin, is pretty good at sticking to the important talking points. And he brings up something that Mitch McConnell said. I don't have a clip. It was last Tuesday on Bloomberg News. None of the programs this morning had that Mitch McConnell clip, but he basically revealed something that we talked about months ago when Republicans passed their tax cut. Was that like a year ago? And how it was like a precursor to this bogus argument about the big deficit they created. And anyway, I will talk about that with you after we watch Chuck Todd asking Dick Durbin about the bad reputation of both the political parties, and Dick Durbin bringing up this Mitch McConnell comment, and I'll talk about it with you before I show Thom Tillis, the next senator, talking to Chuck Todd about the deficit in the final clip. Anyway, I'll talk to you between the two clips after we watch the Dick Durbin clip talking to... wait, hold on. Oh, sorry. There is the Nate Silver clip I promised you is the final clip. These are not the last two clips. There's Dick Durbin, Thom Tillis, and then the final news clip will be Nate Silver from ABC. But these are the final two Meet the Press clips. First, Chuck Todd talking to Dick Durbin, the number 2 Democrat in the Senate, about the bad reputation of Democrats over here.
Leadership issue. You heard the other voice in there was Kyrsten Sinema, the Democratic nominee in Arizona, saying, hey, people don't like parties anymore. And obviously both parties are unpopular in our poll right now. Is that a problem for you, that there are voters out there that you need to win over who don't like the Democratic Party, but you're having to basically make the case, hey, you may not like us, but don't you like the other side less?
Well, it gets down to this, Chuck. There are more and more independent voters, and I think Kirsten's correct in making that assertion. But the bottom line is we are doing well with those independent voters. Take a look at what Mitch McConnell gave us this last week, an insight into where the Republicans are going if they continue to control Congress. In order to deal with the deficits they created with a tax bill for the wealthy people and special interest, they are going to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Those are fighting words for a lot of people, not just Democrats, but independents as well. Pre-existing conditions, making sure that Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid are strong for years to come. That's a good basis to get a lot of people elected to Congress.
I want to play for you an ad that...
And so, yeah, kudos to Dick Durbin for bringing up that comment that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell made to Bloomberg News last Tuesday. Saying, oh, well, the real problem with the deficit is these entitlement programs, the Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. And that's sort of the big Republican master plan, is they passed this big tax cut for the rich, and that created and also jacked up military spending, and that created these huge deficits, almost $1 trillion this year, actually hitting $1 trillion next year. And I'm old enough to remember when the entire national debt was like $1 trillion, and now it's like over 20 trillion, and it's going to be like $1 trillion a year. And Republicans supposedly care about the deficit, and that's the thing, that they're actually going to cut Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security because they jacked up the deficit and the debt with the big tax cut for the rich and the military spending, and now they're going to blame it on the entitlements. And you'll see this next clip, also from NBC's Meet the Press, is Thom Tillis, Republican senator, saying, oh, we're not going to cut those programs, but under questioning about the debt. And you'll see Thom Tillis talks about the powder keg, and by the end of the clip he's saying, oh, maybe we do have to sort of cut those programs, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, in the penultimate news clip before I get to the Nate Silver clip I promised over here.
Take away Medicare, Social Security, or Medicaid from people who need it, but we have to have a sustainable solution, and we need 60 votes to get that done.
Math is a funny thing here in Washington. Nobody seems to want to ever cite it, but we have a record-breaking deficit. A record-breaking debt every day when you watch the debt clock, but a record-breaking deficit this year that may surpass $1 trillion. You now annually, never mind, obviously, the multiples of that in the debt. The president yesterday is talking about a new tax cut. You're talking about reforming Social Security and Medicare. How are you going to pay for this tax cut that the president is apparently proposing?
Well, we've got to make sure that it's at least supported by facts around dynamic growth. It has to pay for itself. We can't go further in debt. I voted against the spending bill, the most recent one, because it was just too much money being spent. And so we've got to get the American people to recognize that we have a powder keg of dynamite and a debt that's continuing to grow. We're reaching a point where the service, our debt service, could exceed our contribution or our investment in the military. We've got to make sure that the American people understand we've got to balance our books. We got to be on a budget just like the American people.
Well, you just said you wanted any new tax cut to pay for itself. This current tax cut's clearly not paying for itself. The debt's increasing, not decreasing, and there's no sign that it's going to decrease.
Well, if you take a look at the scoring for economic growth over time, I think that there is a way to rationalize that this tax cut will pay for itself through sustained economic growth. If we don't make the numbers, it won't. But if we do, and we're already seeing it early into this cycle, then I do believe that we create the net incremental revenue. It's not going to be enough to come anywhere close to retiring our $21 trillion in debt. That's where we're going to have to look at tough choices so that we can balance our books.
Senator Thom Tillis, Republican.
And those tough choices at the end, I think they might have to do with the Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security that he said they weren't going to cut at the beginning. And the $21 trillion in debt, that's kind of what I was talking about. But I don't know. I think it's kind of what I tweeted in response to Lauren's Tribe. If you think that this should be a good slogan for Democrats for the next 16 days, Democrats are for health care, Republicans are for wealth care, you know, that big tax cut for the rich that drove up the deficit. Go to my tweets and replies if you're on Twitter. Retweet that, give it a like, and maybe that can be something that Democrats can focus on more for the next 16 days. And how's it going to turn out? Well, that's the final news clip I want to show you before the bonus Dash and Sandy clip at the end. This is Nate Silver, who, I don't know, was he wrong about 2016? I mean, that's the thing. It's a range. When you see polls within the margin of error, there's a chance, but he talks about what is a 15% chance. Is that a real chance? And while you're watching this clip, I want you to think about if you were at the airport and you were about to get on a plane and the airline said there's a 15% chance that this plane will crash, would you get on that plane? That's a real chance. And that's what we forgot about in 2016 when there was a real chance Donald Trump could get elected. There's a real chance that there will be no blue wave. Democrats won't take the House. They won't take the Senate. That's the 15% chance. It's a bigger disaster than a plane crash, I guess. But Nate Silver points that out and gives the other 538 statistics. And it's a range. It could be Democrats take both the House and the Senate if those unlikely voters come out on the Democrat side. That could happen. And I will talk about what I think about that different range after we watch that range together in the final news clip together, or the final news clip for tonight I want to watch together over here.
Break down his team's latest forecast for the midterms. Nate, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
So let's start with Texas. How do you see the race?
So the polls have Cruz up by a fairly solid margin there, 6 or 7 points on average. We give him about an 80% chance of winning. We should say, though, Texas is a tricky state to poll. Beto would rely on Hispanic voters, young voters, people who newly migrated to Texas. If every eligible voter in Texas turned out, that could be a very close race. If not, you can see him getting 47, 48%. You need 50 to win, and it's still a very red state.
We're going to be seeing that number 80 a lot from your forecast today.
Yeah.
Let's look at the overall Senate forecast.
We're in the 80 zone with a lot of stuff.
Let's look at the Senate forecast. We're going to put it up right now. What do we have there? 2 in 9 chance Democrats win control, 7 in 9 chance Republicans keep control, just shy of 80% there, 79.
Yeah, and it's not a coincidence that that's very similar to the Texas forecast, because it's hard to find a clear path for Democrats right now. They have to win one of Texas, Tennessee, or North Dakota.
All behind right now.
And they're all behind in those races. If you are to have a very good turnout again, then they're not so far behind where it's hopeless, and that's where, the 20% is a real tangible probability. But there, the Senate's a very race-by-race driven forecast, and those races that looked like toss-ups before and have shifted into what we call the lean Republican column, meaning that they have to kind of sweep all the toss-ups Democrats and then win one of these that look a little bit difficult. So you probably need polls to be off overall in the way they were, for example, in 2016, where they just beat their polls across the board. Then we're talking about a possible path, but the Senate math is really tough in all these very red states.
For the Democrats to take control, you might even see Republicans pick up seats.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, it's at least as likely that the GOP would gain seats, and there are scenarios where they win all the toss-up races, and they could win 3 Senate seats, even in a world where they lose the House potentially.
Okay, let's look at the House as well. There were a flip side of the Senate numbers right there. Let's put up the House numbers right now. You see a 7 and 9 chance, 6 and 7 chance the Democrats win control, 1 and 7 chance Republicans keep control. So there it comes down to 85% chance the Democrats win control. That sounds a lot bigger than it is, right?
Yeah, look, I mean, if you were running a business and I told you there's a 15% chance or a 20% chance that your key supplier won't make its delivery, you would treat that as a very tangible, real-world risk, and you would do things to hedge against it. The thing about the House...
I don't know why he has to take the business perspective, but that is a real risk, and if that 15% chance actually materializes... in a few weeks, I will be coming back to you in a very, very bad mood because, like I said at the beginning, this is one of the most important midterm elections in our lifetime, my lifetime. We need a check on Donald Trump. We need at least one House of Congress with subpoena power to investigate all of the... I mean, there's so much. And that's what I'm hanging around for on YouTube, is to, like I said, cover the impeachment, but... that's something the House of Representatives will probably do, although we're not supposed to talk about that. But depending on what Robert Mueller comes back with, and some people say that like Donald Trump Jr. will be indicted before the end of the year. There's so much that could happen if the House goes to the Democrats. So if that 15% chance happens where no houses of Congress belong to the Democrats, I don't know, my Canadian viewers, I might be starting to look for places to live in the North, but I don't know. That would be really, really a dark, dark outcome. Hopefully that won't happen. I have 2 more shows before the midterms. Well, hopefully the blue wave, to some extent, at least for the House, is coming. I'd love for the Senate to go Democratic. I'd love to be coming back here in 3 weeks from tonight and saying, wow, that was great. I now have hope for the future. And I saw some of the live commenters talking about no hope for the future. So I guess we'll find out. I also appreciate the Super Chat contributors I got. I actually took a screenshot of my Super Chat contributors. But then I think I got one more Super Chat contributor after this, but thank you to those people who contribute for supporting my videos through Super Chat, through PayPal. There are links down in the video description. If you contribute $5 a month on Patreon or just a straight $5 contribution on PayPal and give me your shipping address, I will send you this hashtag LiberalViewer weatherproof vinyl sticker. At the $10 level, I will send you that sticker plus a U.S. Constitution that I got from the ACLU. Includes a Know Your Rights section involving, if you're stopped by the police and other things about your rights. So if you are interested in that or interested in just supporting my videos, there are links down in the video description for that. I appreciate all of you who just gave me a thumbs up, gave me supportive comments. For the live viewers, the recorded show viewers. And as I promised earlier, I do have a bonus Dash and Sandy clip taken. It wasn't this morning. It was either yesterday or the day before. I got Dash and Sandy interacting outside in the morning. and it's 17 seconds long to finish up the show for people interested in that for the final non-news clip of the night over here. So there you go. That's pretty much how Dash and Sandy interact. I appreciate all of you who supported my videos just by showing up for the live stream, for the recorded show. Like I said, the thumbs up, supportive comments, any kind of financial support because of the decrease in YouTube ad revenue. I will be back next week with at least, there'll be a Real Time with Bill Maher clip next week, and then a couple weeks after that, Saturday Night Live will come back. I'm sure there'll be some sort of political comedy, and maybe I'll have some time to make an edited, produced video. I'm still working on the Turn the Supreme Court Up to 11 video. There's been a whole bunch of ACLU stuff that's been taking my attention, but I will be back next week and every Sunday for the foreseeable future. Now I'm going to feed Sandy, who's starting to whine again. So I guess until next week or whatever, I will be seeing all of you around the internet.